I knew the second they lowered his casket that something wasn't right. The priest's voice echoed through the cemetery like it was reading from a script, and everyone around me, his mother, his brothers, the cousins who never visited, had dry eyes and stiff faces. No grief. No heartbreak. Just polite nods and hollow stares. Meanwhile, I was on my knees, gasping for air, my fingers clawing into the cold grass like I could dig him back out. My husband was gone. And somehow I was the only one who seemed to care. I was still reeling when his mother turned to me at the wake and whispered, "You should probably leave before the family arrives." The family, as if I hadn't just buried the man I built a life with. As if I wasn't wearing the wedding band he slipped onto my finger 6 years ago under an oak tree in Georgia with tears in his eyes and hands that trembled when he said, "You're my only home." I didn't leave. Not that day. But that was the beginning of the erasure. Within a week I was locked out of our bank accounts. The keys to our home, his childhood estate that we'd lived in together, no longer worked. His mother had the locks changed the same day he died, and I only found out when I returned from the grocery store and couldn't get inside. My name was gone from the family trust. His will, which I knew he had updated months before his death, suddenly reverted to an old version. One that was written before we were even married. They told everyone I was just a phase. A fling he took too far. A woman who latched onto him during a fragile season. They called me a gold digger, a manipulator. They painted me as unstable, said I was too emotional to manage anything responsibly. They rewrote our story like it had never happened. And with him gone, there was no one to stop them. But they were wrong about one thing. Because he knew. My husband knew his family. Knew how cold and calculating they were beneath the southern charm and old money civility. He once told me over wine on our back porch, "If anything ever happens to me, check the safe under the floorboards. Not even Mama knows about it." I'd laughed then. Thought it was just one of his paranoid moments. Now standing outside a locked house with a bag of groceries slipping from my fingers, I didn't laugh. I drove straight to the old cabin we used to escape to in North Carolina. The place no one else visited, where he felt like he could breathe. It was there, under the floorboards of the bedroom closet, that I found the documents. The real will. The audio recording. The insurance files. And something else that made my blood run cold. A sealed letter with my name written in his handwriting, shaky but clear, dated 10 days before he died. I sat on the floor, clutching that letter like it was his heartbeat. I hadn't even opened it yet, but something deep in my chest told me I wasn't crazy. He hadn't just died. He had been silenced. And he knew who was coming for him. I opened the letter with trembling hands, my heart pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. Inside were only a few lines, but they changed everything. "If you're reading this, then I didn't make it." I wish I could say I was surprised. But you know my family, they don't accept threats to their legacy, even when it's their own son. I tried to get everything in order for you. I made sure the real will is signed, notarized, and protected. Don't trust anyone except the names I've listed in the folder. Please be smart. Please live. I love you more than they'll ever understand. I couldn't breathe. He knew. He'd seen it coming. And instead of running, he'd prepared everything to protect me. That folder contained copies of a revised will, naming me as the sole inheritor of his assets, properties, investments, everything. There was even a separate letter to a lawyer I didn't recognize, along with signed papers verifying that he'd moved most of his assets into a trust in my name. A trust his family couldn't touch. The audio recording chilled me. It was his voice, worn and tired. "I'm recording this for legal insurance. If anything happens to me, if I die unexpectedly, I want the world to know it wasn't natural. My mother and brothers have threatened me more than once over the trust changes. I've been disinherited from the family fund because I refused to put my wife through their power games. I caught my brother meeting with my attorney behind my back. I suspect foul play. I want my wife to have everything. She deserves it. She's the only person who ever loved me for me." I sobbed through the whole thing. But grief quickly hardened into something else. Resolve. They thought they had erased me. But my husband had left breadcrumbs. He'd outsmarted them with every move, and now it was my turn to finish what he started. The first thing I did was call the lawyer listed in the folder. He was a quiet older man named Franklin Tate, based in Asheville. When I mentioned my husband's name and the envelope he'd left, Mr. Tate went quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've been waiting for this call." Within 2 days we met in person. Mr. Tate had kept everything on standby: the updated will, the property transfers, even evidence that my husband's family had been secretly trying to move funds overseas in anticipation of contesting the estate. My husband had anticipated everything. Even his own murder. I didn't say it out loud at the time, but I knew. They'd killed him. Maybe not with a knife or a gun, but something just as deliberate. Medication tampering, poisoned drinks, even psychological pressure that forced him into a medical collapse. He'd been healthy, strong. His death had been ruled a cardiac event, but he'd never had heart problems before. And now, with everything I was uncovering, it was obvious. It was murder. And they didn't even try to hide the motive. The money. The land. The reputation. He was going to give it all to me. And they couldn't allow that. So they erased me from the narrative. Cast me aside like a footnote in his story. They'd staged their perfect Southern tragedy, with crocodile tears and front-page obituaries. But now the real story was coming to light. Mr. Tate filed the necessary paperwork with the courts. The documents included my husband's voice recordings, certified timestamps, and a list of all the bank transfers. But the moment the court sent out notices, the storm rolled in. His mother accused me of forgery. His brother tried to bribe Mr. Tate. And then came the threats. Late-night phone calls. Anonymous texts. Even a car that followed me one night when I left the grocery store. They were spiraling, grasping at every thread they could find to hold onto their crumbling empire. But I wasn't scared anymore. They had taken everything from me except the truth. And I was going to make damn sure the world saw it. I scheduled a press interview. Quiet, professional, but undeniable. I released the audio. The signed documents. The notarized will. I told the world how they'd tried to bury me along with him. And once the news hit, people started listening. The court ruled in my favor. I was legally recognized as his widow and heir. The estate transferred into my name. The trust accounts were secured. The properties, the land, the assets, they all came to me. But I didn't want any of it. Not really. I wanted him. But since I couldn't have that, I would do what he wanted me to do. Protect his legacy from the people who only wanted to devour it. His mother went silent after the ruling. But not before trying one last tactic. She showed up at the cabin. Alone. With tears. "You've already taken everything," she said. "What more do you want?" I looked at her. This woman who raised the man I loved. This woman who turned cold the moment he stopped doing what she wanted. "I didn't take anything," I told her. "He gave it to me. Because I was the only one who never made him feel like he was less than human." She looked like she wanted to slap me. Instead she walked away. That was the last time I saw her. They underestimated me. They thought I would break. That once the inheritance was finalized, I'd quietly disappear with a little hush money and go back to being nobody. But they didn't understand. I knew things. Things my husband had confided in me. Things they thought were buried. And I wasn't afraid to use them. After the court ruling, I could have disappeared. Taken the money, left town, started fresh. But I stayed. Because the truth hadn't been fully told. And justice still hadn't been served. I started digging into the family's affairs. It wasn't hard. My husband had stored encrypted files in a hidden folder on a hard drive he kept at the cabin. Files he'd labeled Plan B. In them were emails, offshore account numbers, real estate transactions, and proof that his brother had been siphoning funds from the family's charitable foundation. I handed it all to the authorities. Within weeks, subpoenas were issued. Investigations launched. News broke that the Whitford Family Trust, the shining jewel of their legacy, was under federal audit for tax fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. They lost control of the narrative. The press hounded them. Business partners severed ties. Socialite friends distanced themselves. And the best part? Every time they tried to blame me, the evidence my husband left behind only dug their grave deeper. I didn't stop there. I reopened the investigation into his death. The police had ruled it natural causes. But with the new evidence, I demanded a forensic review. I hired a private pathologist, backed by legal pressure and the new scrutiny from federal investigations. The results were chilling. He'd been poisoned. A slow-acting compound found in his bloodstream, just enough to cause organ failure that mimicked a heart attack. Tasteless. Nearly untraceable. But someone had slipped it into his drinks over time. And only 2 people had access to his personal food and drinks during those last days. His mother. And his brother. The case was reopened. This time as a homicide. It was surreal watching their perfect empire crumble from the inside. These people who walked through life untouchable, suddenly facing arrest warrants, frozen accounts, and social disgrace. I didn't celebrate. Not outwardly. But I slept a little better. And every time I stood in court or gave an interview, I wore my wedding ring. Because this wasn't just for me. This was for the man who saw it all coming and tried to shield me from it. Who gave everything, even his life, to protect me from the monsters in his bloodline. They took his life. I took their legacy. But karma wasn't done yet. One night, about 2 months after the autopsy results were made public, I received a letter. It wasn't signed. But I knew the handwriting. It was from her. His mother. You think you've won. You think this is justice. But you will always be the outsider. You'll never be one of us. You stole him from us. And now you've stolen what we built. She still didn't get it. I hadn't stolen anything. They'd murdered their son for greed. I had simply carried out the justice he deserved. And I was just getting started. I decided to turn the estate into something that would burn their legacy down every time someone drove by it. I opened a domestic violence recovery center in his name. The Marcus Whitford Foundation for Justice and Healing. Every press release bore his name. Every public event was a reminder of what they had done. And I kept releasing little pieces of the truth. Emails. Messages. Leaks to trusted reporters. Bit by bit, the world saw the Whitford family not as royalty, but as predators. Their empire died publicly. 1 arrest. 2 indictments. And the IRS seized the foundation they once used to launder funds. All of it gone. And I stood there unbroken. They tried to silence me. Erase me. Kill my spirit. Instead, I became the one voice they couldn't ignore. And karma just began whispering back. You ever feel like you're in a nightmare that pretends to be real life? That's what it felt like standing in court while my late husband's mother, yes, the same woman who kissed my cheek at our wedding, tried to argue that I was just a phase in her son's life. A calculated gold digger, in her words. And her attorney? Oh, he went further. Said I was emotionally unstable. That I manipulated Marcus, kept him from his family, isolated him. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had already been prepared for this moment. Because Marcus had prepared me. He knew his family. He knew how greedy, how ruthless they could be when money was on the line. Especially his brother, Nathan, who once joked at a Christmas party that if Marcus conveniently died, he'd get his hands on the company's voting shares. At the time, everyone laughed. But Marcus didn't. That night, after the guests left and we curled up by the fireplace, he said quietly, "If anything ever happens to me, I need you to be 10 steps ahead." He wasn't being paranoid. He was being precise. Because months before his death, Marcus had quietly updated his will with a separate attorney, one unaffiliated with the family's usual law firm. He put protections in place, locked his assets under trusts, and made me the sole executor. But he didn't stop there. He made digital copies, recorded video messages, stored everything on a hard drive labeled innocently as Winter 2022 tax docs. I found it weeks after he died, hidden beneath a false floorboard at the lake cabin we used to escape to when things got too intense in the city. That's when I stopped grieving and started planning. One file was labeled Confession, if they kill me. My hands shook when I opened it. In the video, Marcus looked tired. Like he already knew he was on borrowed time. "Babe, if you're watching this, something's gone wrong. I've felt sick for weeks and I can't prove anything yet, but I think someone's slipping something into my food. Probably Mom. Maybe Nathan. They've been acting weird, pushing me to transfer control of the foundation, asking about the will. I've locked everything down. Everything's in your name. Don't trust anyone from the house. And whatever happens, don't stop until you get justice. You have to finish what I started. I broke down watching it. But then I stood up. And I became someone else entirely. I filed a motion to block the probate challenge. With a hidden will in my possession and a backup video declaration from Marcus, the judge halted proceedings and ordered a forensic audit of the family estate. Suddenly the Whitfords were on defense. And it got worse. The autopsy was reopened. The original medical examiner had ruled Marcus's death a heart failure brought on by stress and congenital heart issues. But under court pressure and new lab testing, a different picture emerged. There were elevated traces of digoxin, a substance found in certain heart medications, yes, but also lethal in high doses. Enough to stop a heart. It can be administered slowly over time, and is virtually undetectable unless specifically looked for. Someone had poisoned him. And the last person to serve him food? His mother. The housekeeper gave a statement confirming it. The night before Marcus collapsed, she saw his mother stir something into his tea. When asked, she'd claimed it was just honey for his nerves. Suddenly the narrative changed. Publicly the media picked it up. Was Marcus Whitford murdered by his own family? Read the headlines. Poison, power, and inheritance. Inside the Whitford scandal. The vultures turned on each other. Nathan denied everything. Blamed his mother. The mother claimed I manipulated the lab results. Their lawyer dropped them. One by one their allies disappeared. But I wasn't done yet. The digital files Marcus left behind. They included offshore accounts, falsified donation receipts, and documents showing Nathan and his mother had been funneling millions from the family's nonprofit foundation into shell companies for years. I handed it all over to federal authorities. By the time the subpoenas hit their mailbox, they were already trying to flee. But it was too late. Nathan was arrested at a private airstrip trying to board a plane to the Cayman Islands. His mother was placed under house arrest pending charges for conspiracy, financial fraud, and suspicion of homicide. Meanwhile, I did the one thing that would gut them emotionally more than anything else. I turned their legacy into a monument of truth. The Whitford family estate? I turned it into a women's advocacy and justice center. The marble sign at the entrance now reads, the Marcus Whitford Center for Protection Against Domestic Financial Abuse. Every gala, every press release, every ribbon-cutting ceremony reminds the world who Marcus really was, and who his family really is. And for the record, I don't smile much these days. But when I do, it's when I walk past that sign, knowing they have to see his name plastered across every media outlet attached to me and know they failed. They killed him. But I buried them. You know what's funny? They thought once Marcus was gone I'd crumble. That I'd be some sobbing widow too heartbroken or too meek to fight back. But the thing is, grief and rage, they're cousins. Mine started walking hand in hand the moment I found that hidden drive. The world had started watching. The Whitfords were no longer a revered legacy family. They were a cautionary tale, front-page scandals, podcast exposés, entire Reddit threads dissecting every text, every financial move, every lie they ever told. Me. I was suddenly no longer just his wife. I was the widow who refused to stay silent. It began with a single interview. A journalist from the New York Standard reached out, politely, cautiously wanting a comment. I said no at first. But then I remembered Marcus's voice from that video. You have to finish what I started. So I said yes. The interview aired on a Sunday morning, but by Sunday night it had gone viral. People weren't just watching me, they were rooting for me. Women who had been gaslit by in-laws. Widows who had been discredited after their husbands' deaths. People who had been pushed aside by greedy families. They saw me. They heard me. And I didn't sugarcoat it. I told the world about the poison. About the way Marcus's mother smiled at the funeral, crocodile tears running down her cheeks while she gave me side-eye because I refused to let her pick the burial plot. I told them how Nathan offered me a check. Yes, a literal check, to walk away and not drag the family name through the mud. I told them how the Whitfords forged documents, pressured the medical examiner, and tried to declare me emotionally unstable to silence me in court. And I told them how my husband saw it coming, how he planned for this. Not just with the will, not just with the trust, but with truth, with documentation, with evidence. Suddenly the interviews kept rolling in. I started getting invited to speak on panels about financial abuse. Law schools began requesting copies of my court testimony. Even Hollywood came knocking, asking about rights for a limited series. I didn't do it for the fame. I did it to scorch the earth they thought they ruled. And while the world was clapping for me, Marcus's family was falling apart. Nathan's fraud case went federal. Investigators discovered over $14 million missing from the Whitford Family Foundation. The very nonprofit that used to give out scholarships and sponsor inner-city education programs had been stripped down like a carcass in the desert. His mother, she was indicted shortly after. Not just for accessory to financial crimes, but also for obstruction of justice in the reopened investigation into Marcus's death. Their name was now toxic. Corporations pulled out of deals. Their stocks plummeted. The Whitford business empire was unraveling faster than they could lie about it. But you want to know what really broke them? The moment I renamed the foundation. I'll never forget the look on their faces as they sat in that courtroom, bound by restraining orders, while I, dressed in all black, Marcus's wedding band still on my finger, stood in front of the judge and legally claimed the rights to the Whitford Family Trust and renamed it the Marcus Truth Initiative. The judge ruled that as executor and widow, not only did I control the assets, but that I had legal standing to repurpose them in honor of Marcus's documented intentions. I used his money, their money, to create scholarships for students studying law, forensic science and criminal justice, with a focus on underrepresented communities. Every donation announcement came with a headline bearing my name and his. I was the widow they tried to erase. And I became the woman no one could ignore. One by one they began to lose everything. Nathan's wife filed for divorce. Marcus's mother, once the face of Whitford Charities, was now the face of white-collar crime memes. And the same media outlets that once praised the Whitfords as American aristocracy, they now ran headlines like, "The widow who brought down a dynasty. Justice from the grave. How a murdered husband exposed his own family. Marcus and his wife built a legacy. His death only made it stronger." The sweetest revenge wasn't the scandal. It was the silence. Their phones stopped ringing. Their social invites disappeared. Their once busy lawyers ghosted them. And I stood taller than I ever had before. Every time I walked past a framed photo of Marcus and me, on our wedding day at the cabin during that spontaneous road trip to Arizona where we danced under gas station lights, I felt his presence. He didn't just leave me a fortune. He left me power. And I wielded it like a sword. There's a moment when grief stops hurting and starts burning. Mine turned into fire the day I faced the woman who orchestrated my husband's death, and watched her finally crumble. The courtroom was packed. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the world waited outside those doors like it was the Super Bowl. Every blogger, news anchor and true crime podcaster had shown up. Judith Whitford, Marcus's mother, was facing charges for conspiracy, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice and perjury. And the reopening of Marcus's cause of death? That was the dagger. It started with the toxicology retest. The coroner, forced to re-examine the case under pressure from independent labs, publicly admitted the first report had been manipulated. The cause of death was ruled acute cardiac arrest due to digitalis toxicity. Not a heart attack. Poison. And it didn't take long before the breadcrumbs led straight to Judith. She tried to act frail, arriving in court with a walking stick and trembling hands. But the evidence was merciless. Her private emails, surveillance footage, a recorded conversation between her and Nathan where she said the words, "If Marcus keeps talking about splitting the family trust, we'll just speed up God's plan." God's plan. I remember sitting there listening to her say those words on tape. My fists clenched so tight my nails left crescents in my palms. When she took the stand, her eyes scanned the courtroom for allies. She found none. The same board members who used to praise her stayed silent. Her social circle, gone. Her once loyal PR manager now worked for a victim advocacy group, one that I helped fund. Then came my turn. I stepped up to the witness box, my spine straight, my voice steady. And I told the story. Not just of Marcus's murder, but of the lies, the gaslighting, the falsified documents. I exposed how Nathan manipulated the trust to funnel money offshore. How they tried to bribe me to vanish. How they almost got away with it. Until Marcus outsmarted them. Even from the grave. The courtroom was so silent, you could hear paper rustle when I pulled out the final piece of evidence. Marcus's second will. This wasn't just the standard document. It was signed, notarized, and embedded with time-stamped video proof. Marcus explaining why he no longer trusted his family and how he set up a sealed trust that activated only if he died under suspicious circumstances. He knew. Somehow deep down he always knew. Judith broke. Right there in front of everyone. She screamed. Denied. Claimed it was a smear campaign. But the jury didn't need convincing. Neither did the judge. The sentence? 27 years without parole. Nathan's sentence came soon after. 19 years for financial fraud and obstruction. As they were let out in cuffs, Judith caught my eye. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just looked at her, calm and quiet, and said nothing. That silence was everything. But karma wasn't done yet. The Whitford name became radioactive in business circles. The family's companies went bankrupt. Their estate, Marcus's childhood home, was seized to pay restitution. It's now being repurposed into a domestic violence shelter. Fitting, isn't it? I made sure every dime they ever stole was given back tenfold. To the people who needed it. Victims of legal coercion, wives who had been silenced, children who lost parents to accidents like mine. I didn't just honor Marcus's legacy. I weaponized it. I became the woman Judith never thought I could be. The woman she underestimated. The woman she tried to erase. And while they rotted behind bars, I was walking red carpets with law students I'd sponsored, launching my podcast and turning Marcus's story into a force bigger than both of us. One day, a reporter asked me, "Do you feel like you've won?" I looked at her, smiled, and said, "Winning is for games. This was war. And I survived." You'd think after the verdicts, the prison sentences, and the public disgrace I'd feel peace. But peace doesn't come quickly when you've buried the love of your life. When every memory is laced with what-ifs. Till something changed. For the first time in years, I could breathe without second-guessing every inhale. I could walk into my home without expecting a legal notice on the counter or whispers behind my back. I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't surviving. I was living. It began with small steps. I reopened the scholarship fund Marcus had dreamed of establishing before his death. We named it the Marcus Whitford Resilience Foundation. And the first recipient was a brilliant young woman whose father had also been silenced by a powerful family. Then I wrote the book. Not to sell trauma, but to share truth. To lay it all out. The gaslighting, the fake smiles, the betrayal that wore pearls and perfume. And more importantly, the blueprint I used to fight back. Women reached out from everywhere. Survivors. Widows. Daughters. Lawyers. Journalists. They didn't want gossip. They wanted guidance. So I gave it. I built an advocacy center, launched a podcast, started a legal aid network specifically for women facing coercive control disguised as family obligation. And I didn't just fund it, I led it. Because I knew what it felt like to scream in silence. And I refused to let another woman face that alone. And as for Marcus, he's still with me. In the foundation we built together. In the letters he left behind, which I still read on quiet nights. In our son who asks about his father's bravery like it's a superhero origin story. One day, years after everything unfolded, I visited his grave with our son. He was 8 by then, bright-eyed and curious. He placed flowers at his dad's headstone and asked, "Is it true Grandma tried to take everything?" I looked at him carefully, then nodded. "Yes. But Daddy made sure she couldn't. Because he loved you more than anything. And you stopped her, right?" I smiled. We stopped her. Together. That night, I tucked him into bed, turned out the lights, and sat on the porch as the stars blinked above me. And I finally felt it. Not peace exactly. But purpose. Because I had turned the ashes of betrayal into the bricks of a fortress. One that protects women who have nowhere else to go. One that exposes predators in suits and smiles. One that ensures that no matter how powerful they think they are, truth always outlives the lies. If you've ever been underestimated, silenced, or made to feel small, you're not alone. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. And sometimes what feels like the end is really just the start of your uprising. Thanks for watching. See you in the next story. Don't forget to like, share, and comment if this touched you. And make sure you're subscribed. New stories drop daily, and each one is a voice that refuses to be silenced.